My name is Sandra, and I built the artificial intelligence platform that transformed a struggling startup into a billion-dollar company. 3 years of 80-hour weeks, 3 years of believing in someone else's vision, 3 years of trusting a promise that would change my life forever. Standing in Marcus Thompson's corner office that Tuesday morning, I expected my $100,000 bonus after delivering the breakthrough that revolutionized data processing. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair, laughed until tears formed in his eyes, and said, "My bonus money went to fund the company barbecue party." I just smiled back at him, knowing he had absolutely no idea what was coming next. 4 years ago, I graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with a computer science degree and 3 job offers waiting. Google offered me $140,000 plus stock options. Apple wanted me for their machine learning division. But Marcus Thompson painted a different picture entirely when he approached me at a Silicon Valley networking event that spring evening. Marcus stood about 6 feet tall with prematurely gray hair that made him look distinguished at 45. He wore perfectly tailored suits and spoke with the kind of confidence that made venture capitalists reach for their checkbooks. His startup InnovateTech occupied a modest office space in Palo Alto, but his vision stretched far beyond those cramped quarters. "Sandra, artificial intelligence will reshape every industry within the next decade," he said over coffee at a trendy downtown cafe. "But right now, only Fortune 500 companies can afford the computational power needed for advanced AI processing. What if we could democratize that technology? What if small businesses could access the same capabilities as tech giants?" His enthusiasm proved infectious. Marcus described building a platform that would make sophisticated AI accessible to any company regardless of size. He needed someone brilliant enough to architect the core technology, someone willing to take risks for potentially massive rewards. "I can offer you $90,000 base salary, but more importantly, I want to offer you 25% equity in the company," Marcus continued. "Plus, when we hit our first major milestone, there's a $100,000 performance bonus with your name on it. Sandra, you won't just be an employee. You'll be my co-founder in everything but title." The equity percentage made my heart race. 25% of a successful tech startup could mean millions, possibly tens of millions, if Marcus's vision materialized. We shook hands that evening, and I started at InnovateTech 3 weeks later, turning down those lucrative offers from established companies. Those first 18 months flew by in a blur of coding marathons and breakthrough moments. I developed the foundational architecture for what we called Neuralink, a revolutionary platform that could process massive data sets in real time while learning and adapting continuously. Marcus proved to be an excellent business developer, securing initial clients and managing day-to-day operations while I focused entirely on the technical challenges. We worked side by side during those early days, often staying until midnight to debug complex algorithms or optimize processing speeds. Marcus would order pizza and energy drinks, and we'd brainstorm solutions while eating over keyboards covered in sticky notes. He treated me like a true partner, asking for my input on business decisions and including me in client presentations. The breakthrough came in month 21 when I finally cracked the parallel processing bottleneck that had stumped our team for months. Neuralink could suddenly handle datasets 50 times larger than before while maintaining lightning-fast response times. Within weeks, our client base exploded from 12 small businesses to over 200 companies ranging from healthcare startups to financial services firms. Revenue jumped from $30,000 monthly to nearly $500,000 within 6 months. Marcus hired additional developers and expanded our office space twice. InnovateTech transformed from struggling startup to Silicon Valley rising star, and everyone attributed our success to the revolutionary AI platform I had architected from scratch. But something subtle began changing around month 30. Marcus started referring to Neuralink as our platform less frequently, and my innovation more often during client meetings. When tech journalists interviewed him about our breakthrough technology, my name appeared in articles less prominently, if at all. I assumed Marcus was simply taking point as CEO and didn't think much about it initially. The first real warning sign appeared 6 months ago when I needed to reference our original partnership agreement for tax purposes. I asked Jennifer Walsh, our chief financial officer, for a copy of the founding documents. Jennifer had joined the company 8 months earlier after working at several successful startups, and Marcus trusted her completely with financial matters. "I'll need to check with Marcus about accessing those documents," Jennifer replied, which struck me as odd since the agreements directly involved me. When I mentioned this to Marcus, he seemed irritated and claimed the documents were locked in a safety deposit box for security reasons. "Don't worry about the paperwork, Sandra. Your equity is protected and that $100,000 bonus is coming as soon as we close this next round of funding," Marcus assured me. His tone carried a slight edge I'd never heard before, but I pushed aside my growing unease. 3 months ago, everything changed when I discovered the truth purely by accident. I had stayed late working on a critical bug fix when the office printer started malfunctioning, spitting out dozens of pages across the floor. As I gathered the scattered papers, one document made my blood freeze. It was a founder's agreement dated 18 months ago showing Marcus Thompson as sole owner of InnovateTech with 100% equity. My name appeared nowhere in the document. According to this version, I was simply an employee who had been hired as lead architect with no ownership stake whatsoever. My hands shook as I photographed every page with my smartphone, hardly believing what I was seeing. The letterhead looked authentic. The legal language appeared professional, and Marcus's signature matched his usual style perfectly. But I knew with absolute certainty that this document was fabricated because I clearly remembered our original handshake agreement and the preliminary papers we had signed. I searched through more pages scattered around the printer and found additional forged documents, including employment contracts, showing me as a standard hire rather than co-founder, and financial projections that credited Marcus alone with developing Neuralink. The most damaging document was a patent application listing Marcus Thompson as the sole inventor of the AI processing technology I had spent 2 years perfecting. Standing alone in that empty office at nearly midnight, surrounded by evidence of systematic betrayal, I realized Marcus had been planning to erase me from InnovateTech for months. Every late night I had spent debugging code, every weekend I had sacrificed for the company's success. Every innovative solution I had developed had been leading to this moment where I would discover my own erasure. The devastating realization hit me that Marcus had never intended to honor our partnership agreement. He had used my talent and dedication to build his company, then systematically removed any trace of my contributions. The 25% equity, the $100,000 bonus, even my recognition as co-founder had all been lies designed to keep me working while he prepared to steal everything I had built. I quietly gathered all the forged documents, photographed everything, and left the office without confronting Marcus immediately. That night, I began planning my response, knowing that I needed legal help to fight someone who had demonstrated such calculated deception. Marcus Thompson had made the biggest mistake of his career by underestimating the woman who had built his billion-dollar platform. The next morning, Marcus announced during our weekly team meeting that InnovateTech would begin preparing for an initial public offering. Goldman Sachs had agreed to serve as lead underwriter, and preliminary valuations suggested the company could raise between $800 million and $1.2 billion depending on market conditions. "This represents the culmination of everything we've worked toward," Marcus declared to the assembled team of 23 employees. "InnovateTech will join the ranks of public companies, and everyone who has contributed to our success will be rewarded accordingly." I sat in the back of the conference room watching Marcus present slides showing projected revenue growth and market expansion opportunities. Every chart, every financial projection, every growth metric was built on the foundation of Neuralink technology I had developed. Yet Marcus spoke about his vision and his innovative approach, as if I were simply another employee listening to company updates. The first Goldman Sachs representatives arrived the following week for due diligence meetings. Robert Goldman, a senior managing director in his early 50s, brought a team of analysts to examine every aspect of InnovateTech's business model. They spent hours reviewing our technology stack, interviewing key personnel, and analyzing the competitive advantages that made our AI platform so valuable. During these meetings, Marcus introduced me as Sandra Martinez, one of our talented senior developers who has made significant contributions to our platform development. The phrase stung because it reduced 3 years of foundational work to a generic acknowledgement. I wanted to speak up to claim credit for the innovations these bankers were evaluating, but I knew confronting Marcus publicly would be premature without legal backing. Goldman's technical team asked detailed questions about Neuralink's architecture, processing capabilities, and scalability potential. I found myself providing most of the answers while Marcus nodded approvingly and occasionally interjected with business-focused commentary. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was explaining my own stolen technology to investment bankers who would help Marcus profit from my work. "The parallel processing breakthrough was particularly elegant," Robert Goldman commented after I explained our core algorithms. "How long did it take your team to develop this approach?" "About 18 months of intensive research and development," I replied honestly while Marcus smiled and accepted the implicit credit for managing such innovative work. Jennifer Walsh presented financial projections showing how Neuralink's subscription model would generate recurring revenue streams well into the future. Her slides projected 5-year revenue growth reaching $2.8 billion, assuming modest market penetration and customer retention rates. Every dollar in those projections represented monetization of technology I had created. The psychological manipulation Marcus employed became more sophisticated as IPO preparations intensified. During private conversations, he would reference our early partnership and remind me how much my equity would be worth after going public. He calculated that 25% of a billion-dollar company would make me extraordinarily wealthy, probably worth over $200 million. "Sandra, you're going to be set for life," Marcus said during one of our coffee meetings. "Your grandchildren will thank you for the work you're doing now. The IPO will validate everything we've built together." These conversations were carefully designed to keep me focused on future rewards, while he systematically erased evidence of my actual ownership. Marcus understood that maintaining my motivation was crucial until the IPO completed, after which my contributions would become irrelevant to his plans. The most painful moments came during client presentations where Marcus would demonstrate Neuralink's capabilities to potential enterprise customers. He would walk through technical features I had spent months perfecting, explaining the benefits and competitive advantages with complete confidence. Watching him present my innovations as his own achievements felt like psychological torture, but I maintained professional composure while gathering more evidence for the legal case I was preparing. 3 weeks into IPO preparation, Marcus dropped the devastating news during what I thought would be a routine one-on-one meeting. He had scheduled 30 minutes in a small conference room away from the main office where other employees might overhear our conversation.
Sandra, I need to discuss your future with the company.
Marcus began, his tone suddenly formal and distant.
As we prepare for the IPO, we're restructuring the organization to ensure optimal performance as a public entity. Some roles will be changing, and unfortunately, your position will be eliminated after we complete the offering.
The words hit me like a physical blow. After 3 years of building the technology that made InnovateTech valuable, Marcus was telling me I would be transitioned out immediately after he cashed in on my work. What exactly does that mean? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Marcus slid a folder across the table containing what he claimed was my performance review. The document painted a picture of declining contributions, missed deadlines, and technical decisions that had supposedly cost the company money and market opportunities. Every criticism was fabricated, but the review appeared professionally formatted with specific dates and detailed examples.
I've already identified your replacement,
Marcus continued.
Timothy Brooks has extensive AI experience from his work at Microsoft, and he'll be joining us next month to ensure a smooth transition. You'll have 4 weeks to document your current projects and transfer knowledge before your departure.
The calculated cruelty of his timing became clear. Marcus planned to extract every piece of institutional knowledge from me during the final month, then discard me just as InnovateTech achieved the success my technology had made possible. I would watch from the outside as he became extraordinarily wealthy, selling a company built on my stolen innovations. What about my equity? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear him say it explicitly. Marcus's expression didn't change as he delivered the final blow.
Sandra, you were hired as an employee, not as a co-founder.
There never was any equity arrangement. I think you may have misunderstood our early conversations about potential future opportunities. He was gaslighting me with complete confidence, denying conversations we had both participated in and agreements we had both signed. Marcus had calculated that by the time I realized what was happening, the IPO would be too far along to stop, and I would lack the resources to fight a legal battle against a billion-dollar company. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing the forged documents I had photographed, trying to process the magnitude of Marcus's betrayal. He hadn't just stolen my equity or denied me proper credit. He had systematically planned to erase me from the company I had built while extracting maximum value from my continued work. I realized that Marcus viewed me not as a partner or even as a valued employee, but as a resource to be exploited and discarded. The coffee meetings, the partnership talks, the promises about my financial future had all been manipulation tactics designed to keep me productive while he prepared my elimination. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake in his elaborate deception. He assumed I would accept his version of events without fighting back. He underestimated the determination of someone who had spent 3 years building something extraordinary and wasn't going to let it be stolen without consequences. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Elizabeth Rodriguez, a corporate attorney I had met during a Stanford alumni networking event 6 months earlier. Elizabeth specialized in founder disputes and intellectual property cases, and she had given me her card with the comment that Silicon Valley entrepreneurs often needed legal help navigating partnership challenges. Elizabeth, this is Sandra Martinez. We met at the Stanford Alumni Mixer in San Francisco. I think I need your help with something that's about to become very complicated. Elizabeth Rodriguez's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown San Francisco high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Bay Area. At 41, she had built a reputation as one of the most effective corporate attorneys in Silicon Valley, specializing in founder disputes and intellectual property theft cases. Her Stanford law degree hung prominently behind a desk covered with case files and legal briefs. Sandra, tell me everything from the beginning, Elizabeth said as she poured coffee from an expensive-looking machine in her office corner. "Don't leave out any details, no matter how small they might seem." I spent 2 hours walking Elizabeth through my entire relationship with Marcus, from our initial coffee meeting to the discovery of forged documents. She took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific conversations or timeline details. Her expression grew more serious as I described the systematic erasure of my contributions. "The forged documents are concerning, but they're not necessarily proof of fraud," Elizabeth explained after reviewing the photographs I had taken. "Marcus could claim these were preliminary drafts or internal planning documents. We need to establish a clear paper trail showing your original ownership stake and contribution to the company's intellectual property." Elizabeth outlined the legal challenges we would face in pursuing my case. Founder dispute cases required extensive documentation proving the original partnership agreement's evidence of intellectual property development and testimony from witnesses who could verify my role in creating InnovateTech's valuable technology. "Do you have any copies of the original agreements you signed with Marcus?" she asked. "He told me they were locked in a safety deposit box, but I think he destroyed them," I replied. "However, David Foster might have copies. He's a junior developer who witnessed our early partnership discussions and helped with some initial legal paperwork." David Foster had joined InnovateTech during our second month of operation as a recent computer science graduate from UC Berkeley. At 29, he possessed strong technical skills, but lacked the experience for senior architecture work. David had been present during several conversations where Marcus and I discussed equity arrangements and company ownership structure. I contacted David that evening, explaining that I needed his help with some legal documentation related to my partnership with Marcus. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Mountain View, away from the InnovateTech office, where our conversation might be overheard by other employees. "Sandra, I've been wondering when someone would ask about those early agreements," David said as soon as we sat down. "I kept digital copies of everything because Marcus asked me to help prepare the initial partnership documents. I thought it was strange when he later claimed no such agreements existed." David opened his laptop and showed me scanned copies of our original founders' agreement, clearly stating that I would receive 25% equity in exchange for developing the core AI platform technology. The document bore both Marcus's and my signatures, along with the date from our third week of operation. "I also have email correspondence where Marcus explicitly acknowledges your co-founder status," David continued, scrolling through saved messages. "Look at this one from 8 months ago where he writes about Sandra's equity position and protecting co-founder interests during our Series A fundraising discussions." These emails proved devastating to Marcus's claims that I was merely an employee. They showed him consistently referring to me as a co-founder and discussing my ownership stake in contexts where he had no reason to lie or exaggerate my role within the company. David revealed another crucial piece of evidence that I hadn't known existed. During our first year of operation, Marcus had filed preliminary patent applications listing both of us as co-inventors of the Neuralink processing technology. The subsequent applications that listed Marcus as sole inventor represented obvious fraud. "I've been documenting everything because I worried something like this might happen," David admitted. "Marcus has been acting strangely for months, asking me to help prepare documents that seem to contradict our earlier agreements. I kept copies because I didn't want to be accused of participating in anything questionable." Armed with David's evidence, Elizabeth began preparing our legal strategy. She explained that we needed additional witnesses and documentation to build an ironclad case before confronting Marcus directly. A premature legal challenge could give him time to destroy more evidence or manipulate other employees. Elizabeth's investigation into Marcus's background revealed disturbing patterns that I hadn't previously known about. He had been involved in a similar dispute at his previous startup TechFlow Solutions, where he had allegedly forced out his co-founder just before a major acquisition. "I want to contact Michael Harrison, who was Marcus's partner at TechFlow," Elizabeth said. If Marcus has done this before, Michael's testimony could establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior that would strengthen your case significantly. Michael Harrison agreed to meet us the following week at Elizabeth's office. At 39, he looked tired and wary, but his story provided chilling parallels to my own experience with Marcus. Michael had developed innovative cybersecurity software that became TechFlow's primary product, only to find himself gradually marginalized and eventually forced out before their acquisition by a larger security firm. "Marcus is extraordinarily skilled at psychological manipulation," Michael explained. "He makes you feel like a valued partner while systematically documenting interactions to support whatever narrative serves his interests later. I fought him for 18 months before running out of money for legal fees." Michael's case had ultimately settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but he estimated that Marcus had stolen several $1 million worth of equity that should have belonged to him. The settlement included confidentiality provisions that prevented Michael from discussing details publicly, but he could still provide testimony in legal proceedings. "Don't let him drag out the process," Michael warned. "Marcus's strategy is to overwhelm you with legal expenses while continuing to profit from your work. Strike hard and fast with everything you have, or he'll wear you down over time." Elizabeth coordinated with a forensic IT specialist named Patricia Kim to examine InnovateTech's digital records for evidence of document manipulation and intellectual property development. Patricia had worked on several high-profile corporate fraud cases and possessed sophisticated tools for recovering deleted files and analyzing document creation timelines. "We need to move quickly," Patricia advised during our planning meeting. "If Marcus realizes you're building a legal case, he'll likely attempt to purge digital evidence. I recommend filing for emergency discovery orders to preserve all company records before he has opportunity to destroy them." Elizabeth also reached out to Amanda Foster, a former InnovateTech employee who had left the company 6 months earlier under circumstances that now seemed suspicious. Amanda had worked as our marketing director and had been present during many client presentations where Marcus took credit for technical innovations. "I quit because I couldn't stomach watching Marcus steal credit for everyone's work," Amanda told us during a phone conference. "He systematically marginalized anyone who might challenge his narrative about company origins. I documented several instances where he explicitly contradicted previous statements about Sandra's role as co-founder." Amanda provided email records and meeting notes showing Marcus's evolving story about my contributions to the company. Early documents consistently referred to me as co-founder and technology inventor, while later communications gradually repositioned me as a talented employee who had made important but non-foundational contributions. With evidence from David, Michael, Amanda, and Patricia's digital forensics analysis, Elizabeth felt confident about our legal position. She prepared a comprehensive lawsuit alleging fraud, breach of contract, intellectual property theft, and securities violations. The complaint would seek injunctive relief to halt the IPO until ownership questions were resolved. "Sandra, this is going to be an intense battle," Elizabeth warned as we reviewed the final complaint documents. "Marcus will fight viciously to protect what he's stolen. Are you prepared for the psychological and financial costs of pursuing this case to its conclusion?" I thought about the 3 years I had spent building Neuralink, the countless nights debugging complex algorithms, the innovative solutions that had transformed a struggling startup into a billion-dollar company. Marcus had stolen my work, erased my contributions, and planned to profit enormously from technology I had created. "I'm ready," I told Elizabeth. "File the complaint and request the emergency injunction. It's time to stop Marcus from stealing anyone else's work." The legal battle was about to begin, and I felt prepared to fight for everything I had built and everything Marcus had tried to steal. Elizabeth filed our lawsuit on a Thursday morning, just 72 hours before Marcus's scheduled IPO roadshow presentations to institutional investors. The timing was deliberately calculated to maximize pressure on InnovateTech while minimizing Marcus's ability to respond effectively to our allegations. The federal courthouse in downtown San Francisco buzzed with activity as Elizabeth presented our emergency motion to Judge Patricia Morrison. Our complaint alleged breach of fiduciary duty, intellectual property theft, securities fraud, and racketeering violations based on Marcus's pattern of defrauding business partners across multiple companies. Judge Morrison, a 58-year-old former prosecutor known for her no-nonsense approach to corporate litigation, reviewed our evidence package during a closed hearing that lasted nearly 3 hours. Elizabeth presented David's documentary evidence, Michael Harrison's testimony about Marcus's previous fraud, and Patricia Kim's forensic analysis showing systematic manipulation of company records. The court finds sufficient evidence of potential fraud to justify preservation of all company records pending further investigation. Judge Morrison ruled, InnovateTech is hereby ordered to cease any document destruction and provide complete access to all digital systems for forensic examination. The judge stopped short of halting the IPO immediately, but scheduled an expedited hearing for the following Monday to determine whether more aggressive intervention was warranted. Marcus would have 1 weekend to prepare his defense before facing potential catastrophic disruption of his public offering plans. News of the lawsuit spread quickly through Silicon Valley's interconnected network of investors, journalists, and industry insiders. TechCrunch published a brief article that afternoon highlighting the ownership dispute that could derail one of the year's most anticipated IPOs. The article avoided taking sides, but noted the serious nature of the allegations against Marcus. Marcus responded with characteristic aggression, hiring the prestigious law firm Hartwell & Associates to mount his defense. James Hartwell, a 62-year-old senior partner known for his ruthless tactics in high-stakes litigation, immediately launched a counterattack designed to destroy my credibility and reputation. Within hours of receiving our complaint, Marcus began spreading rumors throughout the InnovateTech office that I was mentally unstable and attempting to extort money from the company using fabricated claims about non-existent partnerships. He called emergency meetings with key employees to discuss my delusional accusations and warned them about cooperating with my legal team. Sandra has been struggling with personal issues for months. Marcus told the assembled staff during a Friday morning meeting I wasn't invited to attend. She's apparently convinced herself that she was some kind of co-founder rather than an employee. I feel sorry for her, but we can't let false accusations damage everything we've built together. Jennifer Walsh supported Marcus's narrative by presenting employment records, supposedly showing that I had been hired as a standard developer with no ownership stake or special status within the company. These documents contradicted everything David had preserved, but they appeared professionally prepared and could confuse employees who hadn't been present during the early partnership discussions. The psychological pressure intensified over the weekend as former colleagues began avoiding me. Several employees who had previously been friendly and collaborative suddenly seemed uncomfortable in my presence. Marcus's whisper campaign was designed to isolate me socially while undermining potential witnesses who might support my legal case. Timothy Brooks. My supposed replacement arrived at InnovateTech earlier than originally planned and immediately began spreading his own version of events. Marcus had apparently told Timothy that I was a disgruntled employee trying to steal credit for innovations developed by the entire team under Marcus's leadership. I've seen this before at other startups, Timothy told several employees during his first week. Sometimes people develop unrealistic expectations about their contributions and become convinced they deserve more recognition or compensation than they actually earned. The most devastating attack came when Marcus attempted to plant evidence suggesting that I had violated confidentiality agreements and stolen proprietary information for personal gain. James Hartwell filed a counter-complaint alleging that I had accessed company systems inappropriately and copied sensitive data to support fraudulent ownership claims. This counterattack backfired spectacularly when Patricia Kim's forensic investigation revealed that the supposed evidence had been fabricated using Marcus's personal login credentials. Server logs showed Marcus accessing systems remotely during non-business hours to create false timestamps and manipulate file histories. "This is amateur hour evidence tampering," Patricia reported to Elizabeth during an emergency conference call. Marcus tried to make it look like Sandra accessed confidential files, but he used his own administrative privileges to plant the evidence. I can trace every fraudulent entry back to his personal devices. The discovery of evidence tampering transformed our case from a civil dispute about ownership percentages into potential criminal fraud charges. Elizabeth immediately contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division and provided them with Patricia's forensic findings. Detective Ray Sullivan, a 38-year-old investigator specializing in corporate fraud cases, launched a preliminary investigation into Marcus's activities. The FBI's involvement sent shockwaves through InnovateTech's investor community and prompted several institutional backers to reconsider their IPO commitments. When founders start tampering with evidence and manipulating computer systems, it suggests much deeper problems than simple partnership disputes. Detective Sullivan explained during his initial interview with me. "We're treating this as a potential securities fraud investigation that could result in federal charges." Judge Morrison called an emergency hearing after learning about the evidence tampering allegations. She was visibly angry when Elizabeth presented proof that Marcus had violated her preservation order by attempting to destroy and manipulate digital records. "Mr. Thompson's apparent disregard for this court's authority is deeply concerning," Judge Morrison stated during the heated hearing. "The court hereby orders immediate appointment of an independent monitor to oversee all InnovateTech computer systems and prevent further evidence destruction." Marcus sat quietly at the defendant's table while James Hartwell argued that the evidence tampering accusations were based on misinterpretation of routine system maintenance activities. His explanations sounded increasingly desperate as Patricia Kim provided technical testimony showing deliberate manipulation rather than innocent administrative work. The hearing concluded with Judge Morrison issuing a temporary restraining order, preventing Marcus from accessing any InnovateTech computer systems or company records without court supervision. She also accelerated our injunction hearing to Friday morning just hours before the first scheduled IPO presentation to major investors. "This court will not permit potential fraud to proceed while investors are being solicited for a public offering," Judge Morrison announced. "If these allegations prove accurate, Mr. Thompson has engaged in precisely the type of misconduct that securities laws are designed to prevent." Walking out of the courthouse that evening, I felt the emotional weight of 3 years of betrayal and manipulation beginning to lift. Marcus had overplayed his hand by attempting evidence tampering, and his desperation was becoming obvious to everyone involved in the case. Elizabeth was confident about our legal position heading into Friday's crucial hearing. "Marcus has given us everything we need to stop the IPO and establish your rightful ownership of the company," she said. "His own criminal behavior will be the evidence that saves your life's work." The final battle was set for Friday morning, with InnovateTech's future hanging in the balance and Marcus facing the consequences of his systematic fraud. Friday morning arrived with unseasonably clear skies over Manhattan as institutional investors gathered at the prestigious Grand Hyatt Hotel for InnovateTech's IPO roadshow presentation. Goldman Sachs had arranged meetings with pension funds, hedge funds, and sovereign wealth managers representing over $50 billion in potential investment capital. Elizabeth and I flew to New York Thursday evening, coordinating with court officials to ensure our legal documents would be served at precisely the right moment for maximum impact. We had received Judge Morrison's preliminary injunction order late Thursday night, granting us broad authority to disrupt any fraudulent securities offerings. The Grand Hyatt's Madison Ballroom had been configured theater-style with tiered seating for nearly 200 investment professionals. Marcus stood at the front of the room wearing an expensive navy suit, appearing confident and composed despite the legal chaos erupting back in California. He had no idea that Elizabeth and I were seated in the back row waiting for our moment. Robert Goldman from Goldman Sachs opened the presentation with market analysis, showing strong investor appetite for artificial intelligence companies. He presented InnovateTech as a category leader with revolutionary technology and exceptional growth prospects that justified premium valuation multiples. InnovateTech represents the future of democratized artificial intelligence, Goldman announced to the assembled investors. Under Marcus Thompson's visionary leadership, this company has developed breakthrough technology that's already transforming how businesses process and analyze data. Marcus took the stage with practiced ease, launching into his prepared presentation about InnovateTech's mission and competitive advantages. Every slide, every chart, every technical explanation was built on the foundation of work I had performed over the past 3 years. Watching him present my innovations to potential investors felt surreal and infuriating. Our Neuralink platform represents 18 months of intensive research and development, Marcus explained, clicking through slides showing processing speed improvements and scalability metrics. We've solved fundamental challenges in parallel processing that have stumped artificial intelligence researchers for decades. William Foster, a lead institutional investor managing pension funds for public employees, raised his hand with a technical question about our core algorithms. Marcus provided a superficial answer that demonstrated his limited understanding of the actual technology underlying InnovateTech's value proposition. The elegance of our approach lies in dynamic load balancing across distributed processing nodes. Marcus continued using terminology I had taught him without truly understanding the underlying concepts. This breakthrough allows us to achieve processing speeds that are 50 times faster than traditional approaches. Sarah Chen, a venture capital partner who had been considering a major investment, asked follow-up questions about intellectual property protection and competitive advantages. Marcus confidently assured her that all core technology was proprietary and protected by comprehensive patent portfolios. I sat in the back of the room knowing that Marcus was committing securities fraud with every false statement about his role in developing the technology these investors were evaluating. His confident presentation masked the reality that he possessed only superficial knowledge of the innovations that made InnovateTech valuable. At exactly 10:35, Elizabeth stood up and began walking toward the front of the ballroom. She was accompanied by Officer Maria Gonzalez, a 34-year-old court officer authorized to serve legal documents anywhere within federal jurisdiction. The room's attention gradually shifted from Marcus's presentation to the unexpected interruption approaching the stage. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson," Elizabeth announced in a clear voice that carried throughout the ballroom. "I'm Elizabeth Rodriguez, and I represent Sandra Martinez in a federal lawsuit against you and InnovateTech. I have court documents that need to be served immediately." The room fell completely silent as Marcus stared at Elizabeth with obvious shock and confusion. His confident presentation demeanor evaporated as he realized that his legal troubles had followed him across the country to disrupt his most important business presentation. Officer Gonzalez stepped forward and formally served Marcus with our amended complaint and Judge Morrison's preliminary injunction order.
Mr. Thompson, you are hereby served with legal papers in the case of Martinez versus Thompson and InnovateTech Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth continued addressing the investment professionals directly. You are being asked to invest in a company based on fraudulent representations about ownership and technology development. The man presenting to you claims to own 100% of InnovateTech, but he actually owns less than 50%. Elizabeth held up copies of our original founders' agreement and David Foster's documentary evidence. The majority ownership of this company belongs to Sandra Martinez, the woman who actually developed the artificial intelligence technology you've been hearing about. She's sitting right here in your audience. Every head in the ballroom turned toward me as I stood up in the back row. The moment felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating as I finally claimed public credit for 3 years of stolen work. Marcus stared at me with an expression of pure rage and disbelief. Furthermore, Elizabeth continued, we have forensic evidence showing that Mr. Thompson has systematically forged legal documents, tampered with computer records, and committed securities fraud to steal Ms. Martinez's intellectual property. The FBI is currently investigating these allegations. William Foster immediately stood up and addressed Robert Goldman directly. Is Goldman Sachs aware of these ownership disputes and fraud allegations? Because if you're selling us shares in a company with disputed ownership, that represents material misrepresentation of the investment opportunity. The room erupted in concerned conversations as investors realized they were potentially participating in a fraudulent securities offering. Several pension fund managers began gathering their materials and heading toward the exits, while others demanded immediate clarification about the legal status of InnovateTech's ownership structure. Sarah Chen confronted Marcus directly from her seat in the front row. Mr. Thompson, these are serious allegations about the fundamental ownership of your company. How do you respond to claims that you've stolen this technology from your business partner? Marcus attempted to maintain his composure while addressing the investors' concerns. These accusations are completely false and represent a desperate attempt by a disgruntled employee to extort money from a successful company. I built InnovateTech from the ground up and own 100% of the company. Elizabeth immediately contradicted his statement by reading directly from our original partnership agreement. This document, signed by both parties and witnessed by company employees, clearly states that Sandra Martinez would receive 25% equity in exchange for developing the core artificial intelligence platform. We also have extensive email correspondence where Mr. Thompson acknowledges Ms. Martinez as his co-founder. The presentation collapsed entirely as investors demanded answers about fundamental questions regarding company ownership and technology development. Robert Goldman attempted to restore order by suggesting that due diligence would resolve these disputes, but the damage to InnovateTech's credibility was already catastrophic. Several major institutional investors announced on the spot that they were withdrawing from the IPO pending resolution of the ownership disputes. Others demanded immediate meetings with their legal teams to assess potential liability for participating in fraudulent securities offerings. Marcus finally abandoned his presentation and retreated from the ballroom with James Hartwell, who had been frantically making phone calls throughout Elizabeth's dramatic intervention. The IPO roadshow was effectively terminated after less than 2 hours, representing complete collapse of Marcus's plans to profit from my stolen technology. Walking out of the Grand Hyatt that afternoon, I felt profound satisfaction knowing that Marcus's fraud had been exposed publicly in front of the very investors whose money he had sought to steal. His carefully constructed deception had crumbled under the weight of documented evidence and eyewitness testimony. Elizabeth was ecstatic about our successful disruption of the fraudulent IPO. Marcus can't recover from this level of public exposure, she explained. Every investor in Silicon Valley will know about his fraud within hours. His reputation is destroyed, and his ability to raise money for any future ventures is finished.
The legal battle was far from over, but Marcus's position had become untenable after the disastrous roadshow presentation. Justice was finally beginning to emerge from 3 years of systematic betrayal and theft. News of the IPO disruption spread throughout Silicon Valley within hours, creating a tsunami of negative publicity that destroyed Marcus's reputation permanently. TechCrunch published a detailed article about the ownership dispute, while the Wall Street Journal ran a front-page story headlined, "AI Startups IPO Collapses Amid Fraud Allegations." The financial consequences were immediate and devastating for Marcus. Goldman Sachs formally withdrew as underwriter, citing material misrepresentations about company ownership and management. Other investment banks that had been competing for secondary offerings also distanced themselves from InnovateTech to avoid association with potential securities fraud. Within 48 hours, 3 additional startups in Marcus's investment portfolio announced they were launching independent investigations into their own partnership agreements with him. The revelations about his systematic pattern of defrauding co-founders had created a crisis of confidence among entrepreneurs who had previously trusted him with their companies. Elizabeth received a call Monday morning from James Hartwell requesting immediate settlement negotiations. Marcus's legal position had become hopeless after the public collapse of the IPO and the FBI's expanding investigation into his business practices. "My client is interested in resolving this matter quickly and amicably," Hartwell said during the conference call. "We believe there may have been misunderstandings about the original partnership arrangements that can be clarified through good faith negotiations." Elizabeth's response was swift and uncompromising. Mr. Thompson committed systematic fraud over a period of 3 years. He forged legal documents, tampered with evidence, and attempted to steal a billion-dollar company from its rightful owner. We're not interested in splitting the difference or accepting token compensation. The settlement discussions took place over 5 intense days in a downtown San Francisco conference room. Marcus appeared haggard and defeated, a stark contrast to his previous confidence and arrogance. The weight of public exposure and potential criminal charges had clearly taken a psychological toll. "Sandra, I never intended for things to get this complicated," Marcus said during one of our face-to-face meetings. "The business pressures were enormous, and I made some poor decisions about how to handle our partnership arrangements." His attempt to reframe systematic fraud as poor decisions demonstrated that Marcus still didn't fully comprehend the magnitude of his crimes. He had spent 3 years methodically erasing my contributions while planning to profit from my stolen work, yet he characterized this as simple business miscommunication. Elizabeth had prepared a comprehensive settlement demand that reflected both the value Marcus had attempted to steal and the additional damages caused by his fraudulent conduct. We demanded 60% ownership of InnovateTech, $3 million in compensatory damages, and another $2 million in punitive damages. Your client's fraud was so extensive that we could seek criminal prosecution and civil penalties that would leave him with nothing, Elizabeth told Hartwell during the negotiations. This settlement offer represents mercy, not weakness. The breakthrough in our favor came when Agent Thomas Mitchell from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division contacted Hartwell directly about the expanding criminal investigation. The Bureau had uncovered evidence that Marcus's fraud extended beyond InnovateTech to include similar schemes at 4 other companies. Carol Stevens, the founder of Test Tech Startup, had provided testimony showing that Marcus had used identical tactics to steal her mobile application technology 2 years earlier. The FBI was building a racketeering case that could result in federal prison time and complete forfeiture of Marcus's assets. Mr. Thompson is facing potential charges under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, Agent Mitchell explained during a meeting with both legal teams. We've identified a pattern of fraudulent conduct spanning multiple companies and victims.
Cooperation with our investigation could be a significant factor in any eventual plea negotiations. Faced with the prospect of criminal prosecution and civil judgments that could exceed his net worth, Marcus finally agreed to our settlement terms. The final agreement gave me 62% ownership of InnovateTech plus $4.5 million in damages and required Marcus to publicly acknowledge my role as the primary developer of Neuralink technology. Judge Morrison approved the settlement during a hearing that attracted significant media attention. Legal reporters from major publications attended to document the resolution of one of Silicon Valley's most dramatic founder disputes. This case demonstrates the importance of proper documentation in business partnerships, Judge Morrison stated during her approval remarks. It also shows that systematic fraud will ultimately be exposed and punished regardless of the perpetrator's initial success. Marcus was required to issue a public statement acknowledging his wrongdoing and my rightful ownership of the technology that had made InnovateTech valuable. The statement appeared in the Wall Street Journal and was distributed to all potential investors who had been considering participation in the fraudulent IPO. I acknowledge that Sandra Martinez was the primary developer of Neuralink technology and a co-founder of InnovateTech. The statement read, I regret the misunderstandings that led to this dispute and wish Ms. Martinez success in her future leadership of the company. The most satisfying moment came when I walked into InnovateTech's offices as the majority owner and new chief executive officer. Employees who had been turned against me during Marcus's Whisper campaign suddenly became very interested in repairing their relationships and demonstrating their loyalty to the company's new leadership. Jennifer Walsh resigned immediately rather than explain her role in preparing the forged financial documents that had supported Marcus's fraud. Timothy Brooks, my supposed replacement, requested a meeting to apologize for his participation in undermining my reputation and asked if he could remain with the company in a reduced role. I was completely misled about the situation, Timothy explained during our conversation. Marcus told me you were a disgruntled employee making false claims about company ownership. I had no idea about the actual history or your role in developing the platform. David Foster was promoted to Chief Technology Officer in recognition of his crucial role in preserving the documentary evidence that had made our legal victory possible. Amanda Foster returned to the company as marketing director, helping to rebuild InnovateTech's reputation in the aftermath of the fraud scandal. The most unexpected revelation came when Elizabeth's investigation uncovered the full scope of Marcus's criminal enterprise. He had been systematically targeting female entrepreneurs and technical co-founders using psychological manipulation and forged documents to steal their intellectual property. Marcus specifically chose women because he believed they would be less likely to fight back aggressively, Agent Mitchell explained. He exploited gender dynamics and social expectations to make his victims doubt their own memories and experiences. 6 other women came forward with similar stories of being defrauded by Marcus at various startups over the past decade. Their collective testimony painted a picture of a predator who had perfected techniques for identifying and exploiting talented women entrepreneurs. The FBI's final report estimated that Marcus had stolen over $40 million worth of intellectual property and equity from female business partners throughout his career. My case had been the largest and most successful, but it represented just one example of his systematic criminal behavior. Marcus ultimately pled guilty to federal fraud charges and received a 6-year prison sentence along with orders to pay restitution to all identified victims. His conviction effectively ended any possibility of future involvement in the technology industry. Standing in my new corner office overlooking Palo Alto, I reflected on the incredible journey from discovering Marcus's betrayal to achieving complete vindication. The legal battle had been emotionally exhausting, but it had also revealed inner strength I hadn't known I possessed.
InnovateTech was finally mine to lead, according to the original vision Marcus and I had discussed 3 years earlier before his greed and deception had corrupted everything we were building together. 18 months after taking control of InnovateTech, I stood before a packed auditorium at the New York Stock Exchange, preparing to ring the opening bell for our legitimate initial public offering. The company that had been built on stolen foundations was now thriving under ethical leadership and transparent business practices. The transformation had been remarkable but challenging. My first priority as CEO was rebuilding the company culture around principles of integrity, collaboration, and shared success. I implemented transparent equity policies, established mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs, and created oversight mechanisms to prevent the kind of systematic fraud Marcus had perpetrated. Today represents not just InnovateTech's public debut, but a victory for ethical entrepreneurship and the fundamental principle that innovation belongs to its true creators. I said during my opening remarks to the assembled investors and media representatives, the IPO raised $320 million at a valuation of $2.1 billion, significantly exceeding our original projections. Institutional investors who had fled during Marcus's fraudulent roadshow returned enthusiastically confident in the company's leadership and long-term prospects under legitimate management. Neuralink had continued evolving under my direct supervision, with processing speeds improving by another 40% and new applications being developed for healthcare, financial services, and autonomous vehicle industries. The technology that Marcus had tried to steal was now generating revenue streams that exceeded even our most optimistic early projections. During the months following our legal victory, I had made a conscious decision to channel my painful experience into protecting other entrepreneurs from similar fraud. Working with Elizabeth Rodriguez, established the Founders Protection Foundation, a nonprofit organization providing legal resources and education to startup entrepreneurs. The foundation offered free legal consultations, template partnership agreements, and educational workshops about recognizing and preventing founder fraud. We had already helped over 200 entrepreneurs protect their intellectual property and equity rights in partnership arrangements. Marcus Thompson's fraud was devastating to me personally, but it also revealed systemic vulnerabilities in how our industry handles founder relationships. I explained during a keynote address at the Stanford Business School, we have a responsibility to protect innovation by ensuring that creators maintain control of their work. Maria Santos, a 26-year-old entrepreneur who had sought help from our foundation, exemplified the positive impact we were achieving. She had developed breakthrough battery technology for electric vehicles, but discovered her business partner was preparing to steal her innovations using tactics identical to Marcus's approach. Sandra's foundation gave me the legal resources and confidence to fight back before it was too late, Maria said during one of our foundation events. I learned to recognize manipulation tactics and document everything properly to protect my intellectual property. The foundation had also lobbied successfully for legislative changes to strengthen founder protection laws in California. New regulations required more comprehensive disclosure of ownership arrangements in startup companies and created stronger penalties for intellectual property theft. Dr. Rachel Wong, a business ethics consultant I had hired to help rebuild InnovateTech's culture, observed significant changes in how Silicon Valley was addressing founder relationships. Sandra's case created awareness about systematic exploitation that was previously ignored or minimized by the investment community. The personal transformation had been equally profound. Fighting Marcus's fraud had forced me to develop leadership skills and personal resilience that I hadn't known I possessed. The shy, trusting engineer who had believed Marcus's promises had evolved into a confident CEO capable of protecting herself and others from exploitation. Jonathan Pierce, Our new chief financial officer had replaced Jennifer Walsh and brought decades of experience in ethical corporate governance. Sandra's leadership style emphasizes transparency and accountability at every level, he observed. Employees know they can trust management to act with integrity and share success fairly. The most meaningful aspect of our success was demonstrating that companies could thrive under ethical leadership while treating employees and partners with genuine respect. InnovateTech's retention rates exceeded industry standards, and our innovation metrics showed continued improvement under collaborative management approaches. During quiet moments in my office, I sometimes reflected on the alternative timeline where Marcus's fraud had succeeded. I would have been erased from the company I built watching from the outside as he profited from my stolen work, while other entrepreneurs suffered similar exploitation. The legal victory had been crucial, but the deeper satisfaction came from transforming a personal betrayal into systemic change that would protect countless future entrepreneurs. Marcus's fraud had inadvertently created an opportunity to build something more meaningful than any individual company success. Michael Harrison. Marcus's previous victim at TechFlow had become a close friend and advisor during my transition to CEO. Your willingness to fight publicly saved other people from experiencing what we went through, he told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. That's a legacy more valuable than any financial success. The Founders Protection Foundation had received inquiries from entrepreneurs in 38 states and 12 countries suggesting that founder fraud was a global problem requiring coordinated solutions. We were developing international partnerships to expand our legal resources and educational programs. Elizabeth Rodriguez had become not just my attorney, but a lifelong friend and collaborator in our mission to protect entrepreneur rights. Sandra's case established legal precedents that make it much harder for fraudsters like Marcus to steal intellectual property, she explained during a recent interview. As I prepared to close InnovateTech's first day of public trading with shares finishing 43% above their opening price, I felt profound gratitude for the painful journey that had led to this moment. Marcus's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but ultimately it had revealed strength, purpose, and resilience that shaped everything I accomplished afterward. The young woman who had trusted a charming entrepreneur's promises had learned to verify everything document carefully and never again allow someone else to control her professional destiny. But more importantly, she had learned to transform personal pain into protective advocacy for others facing similar challenges. Standing at the podium in my company's headquarters, addressing employees who now shared equitably in our success, I reflected on the profound life lesson that had emerged from 3 years of betrayal and legal warfare. Injustice, when confronted with courage and persistence, becomes the foundation for creating justice that extends far beyond any individual case. Marcus Thompson had intended to steal my life's work and erase my contributions to the technology industry. Instead, his fraud had catalyzed a movement for founder protection and ethical entrepreneurship that would outlast any single company or innovation. The most satisfying irony was that Marcus, sitting in federal prison, had ultimately contributed more to protecting entrepreneurs than he had ever contributed to legitimate business development. His systematic fraud had created the educational case study that would prevent countless future victims from experiencing similar exploitation. As I looked toward InnovateTech's future and the expanding mission of our foundation, I realized that surviving betrayal had taught me something more valuable than any technical skill or business strategy. When someone attempts to steal your work, your recognition and your future fighting back isn't just about personal vindication. It's about protecting everyone who comes after you from experiencing the same injustice. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to take credit for your hard work or achievements? How did you find the courage to fight for what was rightfully yours? Share your story in the comments below and let others know they're not alone in facing these challenges. If this story inspired you to never give up on fighting for justice, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength in difficult situations. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that their work and contributions matter and that fighting for what's right is always worth it. Thank you for listening, and remember that your innovations, your creativity, and your dedication deserve protection and recognition. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.